Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, the channel where we share stories of strength, perseverance, and moments that redefine what it means to be a hero. Today's tale is one of loyalty, courage, and redemption. When a quiet gas station becomes the target of a ruthless biker gang, one man stands in their way, an unassuming worker whose skills and determination defy expectations. But as the story unfolds, we discover a deeper motivation behind his actions that will leave you in awe. If you love stories of unsung heroes and powerful life lessons, stay tuned because this one is unforgettable. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. The hum of fluorescent lights flickered softly over the lone gas station, nestled on the outskirts of a sleepy rural town. Moonlight stretched across the empty road, illuminating cracked pavement and fields that stretched endlessly into darkness. Inside the modest convenience store, the air was filled with the faint smell of fresh coffee, motor oil, and aged wood. A wall-mounted clock ticked with a steady rhythm, the only sound besides the occasional hum of the freezer in the corner. Marcus sat behind the counter on a well-worn stool, his broad shoulders hunched slightly as he sipped from a ceramic mug. The gas station was owned by the Henderson family, and Marcus had been working there part-time ever since James Henderson, his best friend, had passed away. It was more than just a job to him, it was a way of keeping his friend's memory alive. Marcus, now in his early 40s, had the look of a man who had lived many lives. His close-cropped hair was peppered with gray, and his chiseled face bore faint scars that hinted at a past far more dangerous than the mundane task of overseeing a gas station. His deep-set eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the store as he took another sip of coffee. Though he was often mistaken for an ordinary man, Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced chaos and survived. He never spoke of his years in the Special Forces. To the Hendersons, he was just the loyal family friend who had shown up when they needed him most. The shrill ding of the door chime snapped him out of his thoughts. A cold breeze accompanied the sound, carrying with it the faint roar of distant engines. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he saw headlights flicker in the distance, growing louder as the vehicles approached. Moments later, the rumble of motorcycles broke the silence. A line of chrome beasts roared into the station's lot, their riders clad in leather jackets, adorned with snarling wolves and jagged fangs. The steel fangs, Marcus murmured under his breath, recognizing the emblem immediately. They were infamous in the region, known for their recklessness and tendency to cause trouble wherever they went. The gang dismounted their bikes, the leader, Razor, strutting ahead with an air of arrogant authority. His long hair was tied back, and a jagged scar ran down his cheek, a permanent reminder of his violent tendencies. Behind him was Tank, a hulking figure whose biceps strained against his leather jacket, and three other gang members who looked equally rough around the edges. The gang barged into the store, their laughter loud and grating. Marcus set his mug down, his calm demeanor betraying none of the unease he felt. Razor made a show of kicking the door wide open, causing the chime to jangle obnoxiously. "Evening, Grandpa," Razor sneered, leaning against the counter. "Nice little place you've got here. Real quaint." Marcus met Razor's gaze with calm precision. "Evening. What can I do for you, gentlemen?" Tank snorted, grabbing a bag of chips off the shelf and tearing it open. "We're just browsing. You don't mind, do you?" He tossed a handful of chips into his mouth and crushed them loudly. Marcus didn't flinch. "As long as you pay for what you take, we're good." The gang erupted into laughter. Razor leaned in closer, his smirk widening. "Pay? Oh, we'll pay when we feel like it." One of the other bikers knocked over a display of candy bars, sending them scattering across the floor. Another began tapping a glass bottle of soda against the counter, each clink a deliberate provocation. Marcus stood slowly, his imposing frame now fully visible. Though he didn't raise his voice, his tone carried an edge that cut through the noise. "I'll ask you once, respect the property, or leave." The laughter died down momentarily as the gang assessed him. Razor tilted his head, his grin faltering ever so slightly as he noticed Marcus's calm yet commanding presence. But Tank stepped forward, his grin feral. "Or what?" Tank taunted, taking a step closer. He was a giant of a man, towering over Marcus, but Marcus didn't back down. The two locked eyes, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus subtly shifted his stance, his weight evenly distributed, his muscles tensed but unassuming. Razor watched the exchange, his smirk returning. "Relax, Tank," Razor said, waving a hand dismissively. "The old man's harmless. Ain't that right, Grandpa?" Marcus didn't respond. His eyes, cold and unwavering, stayed locked on Tank. Tank leaned in closer, his voice a low growl. "You got something to say, tough guy?" Marcus's lips barely moved. "Only this. You're standing too close." The tension in the room was electric, every eye focused on the showdown. Razor chuckled, breaking the silence. "Let's go, boys. We've got better places to be." Tank hesitated, his fists clenching, but Razor's sharp glare made him step back. The gang moved toward the shelves, their laughter echoing once more as they began pocketing snacks and drinks. Marcus didn't move. He watched them carefully, his piercing gaze tracking every motion. His hand brushed against a hidden switch under the counter, a silent alarm connected to the station's security system. As the bikers continued their rampage, Marcus remained still, his face expressionless, but his mind racing. He knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. The hum of the gas station's lights seemed louder now, almost a steady drumbeat, as Marcus kept a watchful eye on the gang. They had spread out, their chaotic energy infecting every corner of the store. Shelves were ransacked, items smashed or stolen, and Razor lounged near the counter with a devil-may-care grin. Tank, emboldened by Marcus's silence, grabbed a bottle of beer and slammed it against the edge of the counter, shattering it. "Oops," he said with a mock apology, the shards of glass scattering at his feet. Marcus's jaw tightened. His voice was calm, measured. "You're crossing the line. I'm asking you to leave." Tank let out a laugh, the sound grating. "Crossing the line? Oh, we're just getting started." Behind the counter, Marcus's hand hovered near the remote lock switch. He gave them one last chance. "Leave, now." Razor sauntered up, clearly enjoying the show. "And what if we don't? You gonna call the cops?" He leaned closer, his tone mocking. "Or maybe you'll handle it yourself, Grandpa." The gang erupted in laughter again, but the amusement was short-lived. With a click, Marcus pressed the remote lock, and the sound of heavy bolts sliding into place echoed through the store. The gang turned toward the door, realization dawning on them. "What the hell?" Tank barked, yanking at the locked door. "What did you do?" Marcus's demeanor shifted. The calm, quiet man who had endured their taunts was gone. In his place stood someone far more intimidating. He straightened to his full height, his voice low and steady. "You have no idea who you're messing with," Marcus said, his eyes cold as steel. Razor's grin faltered. "What's your game, old man? You think locking us in here is going to scare us?" Tank pulled a knife from his jacket, the blade gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He pointed it at Marcus, smirking. "Let's see if you're as tough as you act." In a blur of motion, Marcus stepped forward, grabbing Tank's wrist with lightning speed. With a swift twist, the knife clattered to the floor, and Tank let out a howl of pain as Marcus forced him to his knees. The gang froze, stunned by the sheer efficiency of Marcus's movements. Razor's eyes narrowed, his hand hovering near his belt. "I warned you," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "Now, you're going to listen." The room was silent, except for Tank's heavy breathing as Marcus released him. Razor took a step forward, his bravado wavering. "You're a dead man," Razor hissed. Marcus's lips curled into a faint smile. "Not tonight." The stage was set. Marcus knew the bikers wouldn't back down, but he wasn't about to let them win. This was his battleground, and he was ready to defend it. The air inside the gas station was heavy with tension, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the lights and the shallow breathing of the bikers. Marcus stood at the center of the room, his calm demeanor unchanged, despite the 5 menacing figures encircling him. Razor, the gang's leader, stared daggers at Marcus, his jaw tightening in frustration. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Razor sneered, his voice laced with venom. "You've got no idea who you're messing with." Marcus didn't flinch. His eyes moved between the gang members, calculating, always aware. He wasn't looking for an exit. He was evaluating the room as a battlefield. "Last chance to leave peacefully," he said quietly, his voice low but resolute. Tank, still nursing his bruised pride after being disarmed earlier, spat on the floor. "You're dead, old man." He lunged at Marcus with a roar, his massive frame barreling forward like a freight train. But Marcus was ready. With a deft sidestep, he used Tank's momentum against him, grabbing the back of his jacket and slamming him face first into a nearby shelf. The impact sent cans of soup crashing to the floor, and Tank crumpled in a heap, groaning in pain. The room erupted into chaos. The other bikers charged at Marcus simultaneously, their confidence bolstered by their numbers. But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't have known, was that Marcus had spent years training for situations far worse than this. The first biker swung a heavy wrench at Marcus's head. Marcus ducked, delivering a precise jab to the man's ribcage that left him gasping for air. In one fluid motion, Marcus grabbed the wrench and used it to deflect a second attacker's wild punch. With a quick spin, he sent the wrench crashing into the second man's kneecap, dropping him to the ground, 2 down. The remaining bikers hesitated, their bravado faltering as they watched Marcus dismantle their comrades with surgical precision. Razor barked an order, trying to rally them. "What are you waiting for? Take him down." One of the bikers rushed forward with a crowbar, swinging it recklessly. Marcus sidestepped the attack, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it until the crowbar fell from his grasp. A sharp elbow to the temple sent him sprawling to the floor, 3 down. The fourth biker, smaller and wiry, tried to dart around Marcus, aiming to flank him. But Marcus anticipated the move. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and sprayed a blinding cloud of white foam into the man's face. Disoriented, the biker stumbled back, only for Marcus to deliver a swift kick that sent him crashing into a display of potato chips. 4 down. The room fell silent again, save for the groans of the defeated bikers. Razor stood alone now, his hand trembling as he reached beneath his jacket. Slowly, he pulled out a sleek black pistol, the barrel gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Enough games," Razor growled, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. "You're tough, I'll give you that. But let's see how tough you are against this." Marcus didn't react immediately. His eyes locked onto Razor's, unflinching, as if daring him to pull the trigger. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with anticipation. "You sure you want to do that?" Marcus asked, his voice calm, almost conversational. Razor hesitated for a fraction of a second, and that was all Marcus needed. He moved like a shadow, grabbing a bottle of motor oil from the counter and hurling it at Razor. The bottle burst on impact, drenching Razor's hand and the pistol with slippery liquid. Before Razor could recover, Marcus was on him. He twisted the gun from Razor's grip, sending it skittering across the floor. Razor swung wildly, but Marcus ducked under the punch and drove his shoulder into Razor's chest, sending him crashing into a rack of magazines. The fight was over in seconds. Razor lay on the ground, coughing and sputtering, his once dominant presence reduced to a defeated heap. Marcus stood over him, breathing steadily, his expression unreadable. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the tension like a blade. Moments later, red and blue lights flooded the parking lot as 2 police cruisers skidded to a halt outside. Officer Daniels, a grizzled veteran of the local police force, stepped inside, his hand on his holstered gun. He stopped short when he saw Marcus standing amidst the chaos. The defeated bikers sprawled around him. "Marcus," Daniels said, shaking his head in disbelief. "What the hell happened here?" Marcus glanced at the fallen Razor, then back at Daniels. "They didn't want to leave." Daniels let out a low whistle, surveying the scene. "You took all of them down by yourself?" Marcus didn't answer. He simply crossed his arms and stepped aside as the officers moved in to cuff the bikers. As Razor was hauled to his feet, his eyes burned with hatred. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. Marcus leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just someone keeping a promise." The sun was beginning to rise, casting a warm golden light over the gas station as the police escorted the bikers to their vehicles. The once chaotic store was now eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the crunch of gravel underfoot and the occasional groan from the defeated gang members. Inside, Marcus stood behind the counter, calmly sweeping up broken glass and scattered debris. His movements were methodical, his face calm, but his mind was elsewhere. A soft chime signaled the arrival of a car. Moments later, Emma and Sam Henderson, James's widow and teenage son, stepped inside. Emma's face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling. "We heard what happened. Are you okay?" Marcus set the broom aside and gave her a reassuring nod. "I'm fine. They won't be coming back." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around Marcus. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Sam, who had always looked up to Marcus, stared at him with a mixture of awe and admiration. "You really took down all those guys by yourself?" Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "They underestimated me." As Emma and Sam began helping clean up the store, Marcus's thoughts drifted to the past. He could still hear James's voice, the promise they'd made to each other during their last deployment. "Look after them, Marcus," James had said, his voice weak but resolute. "If anything happens to me, promise me you'll take care of my family." "I promise," Marcus had replied, his words heavy with meaning. The memory faded as Emma placed a hand on his shoulder. "You kept your promise," she said softly, as if reading his thoughts. Outside, the police loaded the last of the bikers into their vehicles. Razor, his face bruised and bloodied, glared at Marcus one final time, but there was no defiance left in his gaze, only fear and confusion. As the cruisers disappeared down the road, the gas station returned to its usual stillness. Marcus stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cool morning air. The horizon was painted with hues of orange and pink, a new day dawning. He stood there for a long moment, reflecting on everything that had happened. The fight, the chaos, the danger. It was all worth it to keep his promise to James. With a quiet resolve, Marcus turned and walked back inside. The gas station was peaceful once more, and Marcus knew he would continue to protect it for as long as the Hendersons needed him. Some promises, after all, were worth keeping. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of bravery, loyalty, and redemption. Marcus's story is a reminder that promises made from the heart can inspire extraordinary actions, even in the face of danger. It's about the quiet strength of standing up for others and the ripple effect it can have on those around us. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments, and don't forget to share where you're watching from. Your support helps us continue to bring you tales that inspire and empower. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another story from Hopeful Horizon. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay strong, and always protect what matters most.